Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Thin Green Line podcast. We want to thank our listeners and our viewers today, especially because you guys have really made this podcast popular, and we haven't even been up a year yet on the Thin Green Line. But you've been with us through Warden's Watch for a couple of years now, and between the two podcasts, it's been going fantastic, and we couldn't do it without your support. We just want to ask you, if you have a minute, get on Apple and do a 5-star rating. If you're liking the podcast, so we can network it a little bit more. Conservation is a big issue, as you guys know, and all the really dynamic and fun guests we've had appreciated as well. So with that being said, we have a very special guest today. We're going to be talking to Barry Kirch, the iconic drummer of the multi-platinum rock band Shinedown, who, unknown to many of you guys, is quite the conservationist and outdoor enthusiast and lover of all things outdoors. So we share a lot of passions in the same area. And Barry, how you doing this morning?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Yourself?
Dude, we're great. It's so cool to have you on the show. And I know you and I have had the opportunity to meet and talk through other podcasts and really connect on a lot of levels, both musically and especially on the outdoors. And so we've got a lot of questions, but I kind of want to start with you as a drummer.
Sure.
You know, we both love music. I'm part of a rock band up here to a far less scale than what you guys are doing on the professional side of Shinedown. And hey man, it's all cool. You know, we share that, and I love your music. I'm a fan myself, and a lot of our listeners and viewers have been following Shinedown, and you guys have been rocking hard and touring for, man, 2 decades. You've been with the band almost 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. It started here where I live now in Jacksonville, Florida. God, it's hard to say, but 20 years ago.
That's hard for us to say too, Barry.
Yeah, right? It's amazing how quickly that time flies until you look in the mirror and see all the great. But yeah, 20 years and still going strong, still enjoying what we do, which is most important. You know, obviously everybody's had a tough year or so. We're not touring and things of that nature with the pandemic, but we're still making music and we're working on whatever our next record is. So it's a labor of love and a passion, and I still enjoy it. I'm sitting here in my home studio as we speak. So
yeah, I see some cool equipment back there. It's always good to see the home studio going. We got a little bit of the same going on this side, but you know, the cool thing is you guys are one of these bands, and some of the biggest rock bands that I'm fans of, you know, Shinedown included, and Rush, and all these bands have just stuck together as friends, as teammates, as brothers, and they've been so, you know, effective and so successful because they keep that relationship and that team spirit going first. You know, they don't have these meltdowns and the egos and all of that. And you guys just seem so balanced in what I'm getting to know from you guys. And it's the same thing we see in conservation. You know, you're talking to a couple of game wardens that both have 30-year careers, retired. You know, Wayne was a supervisor in New Hampshire, working squads and teams that, you know, at life or death situations, relying on each other. You know, my background with the tactical unit with Matt. You're the same type, you know, and now that, you know, being out of special operations from a law enforcement standpoint, being in a band myself, I have that same relationship with my bandmates up here. And it's kind of like a new tactical unit, you know, you really got to rely on each other and all of that. And I mean, you guys you've done 6 studio albums, if I'm getting that correct, and over 10 million record sales. And you guys have been on a worldwide tour. And I know when I was introduced to you, you guys were just coming off the, I think the European tour for the newest album, Attention, Attention, and just getting ready to start here in America. And I was this close to getting to go hang out with you guys. And then the pandemic dropped, man. So we'll let's hope this ends so we can finally do that. But now that you've been through this whole process, let's go back to the very beginning. When did you start drumming, and who are your mentors, your influences in the rock and roll world to catalyze all that?
Sure. I started pretty young. I was 7 years old.
Wow.
I was thankful, but I have a very supportive family, both my mother and at the time my grandmother and grandparents. My grandmother, her brother was a jazz drummer. Nobody famous, and I didn't actually ever meet him, but she said I was reminded her of him. And so for my 7th birthday, I, you know, instead of the pots and pans that I was ruining, I finally got my first snare drum. And able to get lessons and started from there and kept playing. And I was lucky enough that I played in the school system, but I also had some really good teachers early on that were able to guide me and introduce me to a wide range of music that I probably wouldn't have been introduced to. And I have an older brother who's a huge music fan and actually a a professional radio DJ and has been for a long time now.
Nice.
We'll put that out there for a long time now. So he was always introducing me to music, 80s metal and things of that nature. So music was a thing in my life. I think early on, my drumming influences ranged from, it was a lot of 80s metal stuff. So it would have been Iron Maiden, Nico McBrain. And he was a big one for me because, everybody in that time period had the big drum sets with the big double bass, and we couldn't afford that. And we couldn't afford double bass, And Nico was the one guy that played with a single bass drum of that period. And I was like, that's my guy. And I like their music, and their album covers were really cool, with the iconic Eddie and those things. So he was a big one. And then, it branched from there into, Def Leppard and what was popular at the time, but then into Stuart Copeland of the Police. And then I fell in love with R&B, and especially James Brown and James Brown's drummers, because of just how funky that was. And then I had the teachers throwing me into the jazz world and those areas, Louis Bellson, like the classic big band, even up and through the more modern Chick Corea type of jazz. So pretty varied early on. My passion is always rock and roll, and that's playing a rock and roll band, but I was very lucky to be introduced to a lot of it and to work on that and be taught some of those things. I mean, I couldn't hold a jazz band together to save my life these days, because that's not something I work on as much anymore, but I still enjoy it and I still listen to it, and there's still a ton to learn. I still take lessons to this day, actually.
That's super cool. And it's you hit it. It's so rare to hear rock and roll drummers saying that they had any background in like jazz or symphonic or any of that stuff, and to have it at such an early age, the diversity of that's super, super cool. So how did that morph into getting to the professional level, and where were you before Shinedown, and what happened when you met Brent and the guys and all of that good stuff?
Well, I played through school, and I played in the marching bands and all that. I was drum major my senior year of high school and all those things. And that got me a scholarship to the University of Central Florida down in Orlando.
Nice.
And so I went there and was in the music program for my first 2 years in the marching band, and kind of fell out of love with the scholastic side of music, because the program there, though very good, was grooming you to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a rock drummer.
Right.
And so I moved on from that, ended up getting my degree in anthropology, and I was going to do forensic anthropology. And in doing that, I had very little bit of chemistry, and took that chemistry to get a basic biology job up here in Jacksonville, Florida. I was working for a company called Lake Doctors, and our job was to spray for feral weeds in the water system, all the retention ponds and lakes and stuff around this area, spray for feral weeds without killing the wildlife. And so it was a great job. I'm up at 4 a.m. in the lakes, finding all the best fishing spots. And it was cool, and seeing gators and seeing the water moccasins get scared to death by them, because they're little territorial suckers. So, I was doing that, and my brother, being in radio, said, "Hey man, there's this guy, Brent Smith. He's here writing stuff and working in the studio. He signed to Atlantic. He's looking to build a band. He's holding auditions for a drummer." And he said, "I think you'll really like his voice." And I got a demo of Brent Smith's project.
Oh, geez.
And listened to it and went, "Yeah, I love his voice." Went and auditioned. And it was at the time our original guitar player and bass player, Brad and Jason, were already in the band. So they were looking for a drummer. And my audition was 2 songs that were on the first record, Lacerated and 45, which 45 ended up becoming one of our more popular tracks.
Right.
And so I go in and play, and they said, "Okay, good. You played those well. Why don't we want to see how you do in the studio?" So the next day I pack up my drums, I go to the studio, or not the next day, but within that week, go into the local studio that they were working out of, that no longer exists. But I go in there and I set up my ratty broken drums and cymbals, because they weren't exactly studio ready at the time. And we recorded 45, and they're like, "Great, you can record in the studio. You didn't get red light fever. You're in the band."
Wow.
All of a sudden,
quick.
Yeah.
Like
a month later, we're in LA recording. And what's funny about that whole time period is we go to LA and we record the record, and we did some of it in Atlanta as well. But we did another version of 45 that was big and grandiose with strings and everything else. And once the record was done and we're listening to it with our A&R and our label guys, they're like, you know what? That original version of 45 just had a vibe to it. So the one you hear on the radio and the one you hear on the record is actually my audition piece.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
See,
with all those
there's a
broken
little
cymbals and everything else.
There's a little Shinedown trivia that people will be excited to hear. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and then from then on, it's you know, we've had our ups and downs, and obviously the two original players aren't here anymore. I mean, they're alive, but they're not in the band anymore. And like you said, teams, sometimes they break down and you got to reform, and that happened. And it was it was a different time. I still talk to those guys. I'm actually giving our original guitar player's son drum lessons as we speak, but
Nice.
It just didn't work out, and we had to regroup. And now Eric and Zach that are in the band and have been in the band longer than the original two were in the band. You know, it's one of those things. It's just a better fit and it works better, and we've actually grown more because of that.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And you can definitely see that in the newer albums. And, you know, we've been, you know, from a cover standpoint, we've been playing with some of your stuff. We cover a lot of classic rock stuff, but you're an amazing singer, Brent. Oh my gosh. You know, that is one of the best, highest, most balanced singers I've ever known in the rock world. And being the highest singer, we're working on some stuff. Second Chance is one of those that I can do. Some of his other stuff I can't, but you guys have some fantastic new songs and the classics, and love that stuff on Attention, especially. Real cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, he's really an impressive guy, and it's a gift from God, because he's not trained as a singer. He just started singing. He didn't grow up in a music family. He grew up in a very Southern Baptist style family. You're not going to listen to that, and they would throw out his CDs and stuff like that. But his dad gave him a Otis Redding, I believe it was a cassette at the time, and he would listen to that over and over and fell in love with that voice. And that's how he learned to sing, was singing to Otis Redding, of all things.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, just the passion in your band comes out and everything you guys do, from the early stuff all the way to the latest stuff. And he just sustains it. It's incredible. So yeah,
he's very honest in his music, which is cool. You know, he can't write fairy tales. You know, he doesn't pull it from. They're all life experiences. Everything you hear from us is real. So that's what I think makes it special, and why the fans continue to connect to it.
Yeah, no, it definitely comes across. And on that note, what are some of your favorite songs that you like to perform live? When you guys get back on the road, both, you know, from Shinedown stuff, but you guys do a heck of a lot of cool covers too. I actually discovered you guys through covers way back when you covered Simple Man. And that song was dedicated to me, kind of between like my mom and my relationship and the whole career journey and everything. And honestly, your guys' version, how Brent sings that, is the most moving from the original. So your covers are incredible, but what do you like to play, man? I mean, everything's cool, but do you have some favorites?
Yeah, I think for me, when you're playing and watching the crowd in front of you, and you know this from watching the crowd, when you see the reactions, that's what gets you into the song.
Oh,
yeah. Because I've played all these songs a million times at this point. So for me, it's not as much fun. You know, I don't sit in my room and go, I'm going to play Shinedown songs.
Right.
Unless we're in rehearsal.
Right.
But when you're doing a show, the songs like Enemies or Sound of Madness, that you can see the crowd start to do this thing and they're starting to swell and you see the fist in the air. Those are the songs for me. And then sometimes, like the Second Chances or the ballads, when Brent gets the lighters up in the air and here you are in front of a crowd of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, and you see a sea of lighters. I mean, it still gives me chills to this day to see that. That's what makes it special. So it's the crowd reaction to certain songs that really gets me going.
Yeah, no, I share that 100%. And it's sometimes some very weird songs. They're not necessarily the most popular songs, a B-side thing. And for me, you know, being singing most of the songs for our band, it's usually some of those slower ballads that I end up doing. It's strange, you know, and we like to stay harder like you guys do, but when we do that, the crowd loves it. And we got to have that in our repertoire, like you guys do. And that's when the connection of the audience is the most powerful. And it's usually later in the set, late at night. And it's just amazing.
A lot of times you come to find out, you know, like you, Simple Man was a thing in your life and your career. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and said, hey, that song was played at my graduation.
Yes.
Or at a funeral, you know, or we got married to that song, or that was my mother mother's son dance at my wedding, and I'm like, are you kidding me? You know,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things are, and that's, I think, when you play those ballads,
Connection.
and even, you know, there's a connection there. You know, it's funny how many of the younger generation comes up and says, "Hey, we love your song, Simple Man." I'm like, whoa, 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 that's not our
Wait,
song.
whoa, that's
That's
yeah.
that's hallowed ground. We don't mess with that. You know,
You're like, we're the fourth band to cover it, but thank you.
yeah, but thanks.
Yeah. Barry, I got to ask you, you know, being a drummer, you know, we lost kind of an iconic drummer last January, Neil Peart of Rush.
Yeah.
How did that, I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but no matter where you are as a Rush fan or not, they were very
Sure.
influential, you know, growing up for me, and, you know, big fan of them and you guys and many other 80s rock bands especially. But your thoughts on that? How did that resonate with you as a drummer, you know, and knowing
It was right. It was weird because to say I'm not a Rush fan is wrong. I'm a fan of Rush, but I wasn't the diehard fan of Rush.
Yeah.
And Neil was a huge influence, but it wasn't. He wasn't my first go-to as my favorite drummer. You know, everybody says my favorite drummer is Neil Peart. He wasn't that, but was he a huge influence? Yeah, he was iconic, and he created pretty much prog rock drumming, or at least put it on the forefront. You know, there's King Crimson and other drummers that were there at the same time, but it was him that everybody said that's that. And it really hit me hard. It really did. And I didn't think it would. You know, I was sad, and I know guys that know him, and I know a lot of drummer friends of mine that have either worked with them, toured with them, or you know, people in the industry. And, you know, I just sat here, and it was one of those that I went, damn, not him. One, he's too young.
Right.
He kept it hidden so well. And he had such a hard life leading up to that. Yeah, he had all the successes with Rush, but his personal life was really hard, and it was finally put back together. And then he was gone. And that it was hard to see. It really was. But you know what? No matter how early you go out or whatever, he left a legacy, and that's pretty cool. Not a lot of people get to do that. And if you get to leave something behind that people remember forever, you know, Rush will always be talked about, and Neil Peart will always be a household name. That's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing about it was so moving for him. And, you know, I see this a lot, you know, in you as a conservationist and your love for the outdoors and family, not your typical, you know, rock and roll stereotype drummer. And the thing was with his riding and, you know, his adventuring and his motorcycling and his hiking and skiing, I mean, the spirit of the wild was in him so deeply, like it is in you and me and Wayne and your bandmates, you know, and that's what really tore me up. And the losses, you know, losing his wife and his daughter within a years ago, and the band going on a hiatus and bouncing back from that, you know, like you guys, they always had a message of striving and motivation and adversity and getting through adversity. And it usually resorted to coming back to that inner circle team. And I see that analogy between what Alex, Geddy, and Neil were as a band and a team growing up since high school, and then you guys in Shinedown. You know, and there's just so few bands that do that. So, and being a drummer and of your quality, I've never got to ask you that before. So it's an honor to kind of share that. And we still feel the sting of losing Neil. We cover one Rush song, you know, in our band in Area 56, and the guys are gracious enough to be doing some more with me, since I am one of the biggest Rush fans in the band. But yeah, the few jams we did, the gigs we had that I've shared with you that we could do through COVID, we tributed, you know, New World Man to Neil, and everybody in the audience resonates with that, whether they were 70 years old or 15. You know, they just kind of knew that legacy. So yeah, I've been wanting to ask you that, and I figured you were hit as hard as we were, and I'm sure your bandmates were too. So
yeah, there's certain ones that go, and especially when it's a surprise and when they're as young as they are. You know, they were still playing. You know, it wasn't like he was 80 something years old and you're like, oh, that's a loss, but you know, he had a great life. You know, when knock on wood, Willie passes, I'm a huge Willie Nelson fan. When he passes, it'll be like, man, he had a good one. You know, it's sad, but oh, he had a good one, you know. But you get guys like that, or you know, Chris Cornell or something like that, when it's just too young, and it's just sad.
It is. Early 60s just doesn't, that was quick and hard. So COVID, we talked about this on another podcast together, and being locked down and not being able to see the band and not touring. What's next for you guys? And I know the lockdowns, I mean, things are still opening up kind of slowly on the grander scale for a professional group like you guys. what's next? How are you guys holding up?
Well, it's a blessing and a curse. Thank goodness that I was able to have this time with my family, which is the best. This is the longest I've been home in 20 years with my family.
Yeah, right.
And that's been great, reconnecting with my wife and getting to hang with my daughter and taking them on multiple camping trips and going in the outdoors and being able to, I was home for a full hunting season. That's rare.
Yeah.
So that's been cool, and spending time with my parents who live here and fishing with my father. That's been great. When it comes to the band, it's been horrific. I miss my guys. I miss the shows. I miss traveling, all of those things. The good news is during this time we've been writing.
Nice.
We have a record coming. We have plans for that in probably at least a song coming out this year, and then the record next year would be the ideal.
Awesome.
And with touring, I think we'll get to tour this year. It's very difficult, and I think it's going to be a state-by-state choice. California, probably not. They have a different lockdown system. New York City, probably not. Midwest, yeah. Texas, probably going to happen.
Yeah.
It
come out to
depends.
the Northwest. You come out North Montana toward us, man. We'll be there.
Exactly.
Yeah. States will have you any day, man. Tomorrow.
Yeah, the Dakotas and Montana, it'll be like, all right, come on out and play. So I think this fall we had spring stuff, and those are still a possibility, but it's still really hard with the rollout of the vaccine and those things. So I think this fall we'll get a solid U.S. dates down, festivals and things. When it comes to international, who knows? That's a crapshoot. I think everybody's gonna have to have a card or something saying I got the shot before we can go over there, which really bums me out because I really enjoy touring over there. But as long as we get to play again, I'm ready to go. I've been ready to go. I'm like, here's both arms. Can I get both at the same time? Let's go.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Go. Well, here's to hoping you guys get back on at least a little bit, mid-year or something, and we'll get to see you for the rest of the attention and the new stuff that we didn't get to see last year.
Yeah, it was a bummer getting cut off, and we were going to do that acoustic run where we were playing all the deep tracks, and we enjoyed doing that at the end of a touring cycle. That attention was waning. It was time to move on to what's going to be the next record.
Right.
And we tried to end a tour, and we did on Sound of Madness and Amaryllis, where we can go and do smaller venues, but it's for the fans, and they get to call out, I want to hear What a Shame, which we never play, but it's a good song. And we'd play all those deep cuts and maybe play a few more covers and have a good time. Those shows are a lot of fun and mind numbing at the same time, because I got to remember how to play those damn songs. But
go back on the Wayback Machine.
We're going to play what tonight? Okay, we better sound check really hard on that song. So those tours are fun, and it's a bummer that we didn't get to do that, but we'll get back out there. I think it's got to get back to somewhat normal eventually.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it, man. We're pulling for you guys big time.
Thanks.
I'm sitting back here as a consumer, not as a host, because I'm listening to you guys go back and forth. And this is the podcast I want to listen to, because I'm enjoying you guys going back and forth with your professionalism. And, I think this is what the Thin Green Line is all about, is bringing people that support conservation law into, so other people that support us can understand that the deep connections we have. And that's kind of, I do a lot of research, Barry, when I'm not real familiar with our guests. So I listen to a lot of your interviews and stuff. And I'm excited to bring out this outdoor side of you, because I don't think that's been brought out a lot. And, the passion, that wild edge that you and John spoke about, that's in both of you. John went one way, you went another, and he kind of played in the music as well. But that wild side of you, that outside, that conservationist, that guy that, hunts and fishes and really connects to nature. Like you said, that first job, you were watching all those little things that were going on, and you had a deep connection there. And I'd really like to peel back that onion and talk about, that side of you. And does that, and does that influence your music at all? I mean, that outdoor connection, that wild side?
I think maybe a little bit, but not intentionally, because I think the wild side, especially being a drummer, is in you when you play drums. That wild, that abandoned, that you just let loose, and it's a
grouse
freedom.
drumming in the morning.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. That's
Or that damn squirrel that's got your number and gives you away. You know, it's primal. Drums are primal. You know, it's one of the original instruments. You voice, and then we started hitting things. So I think it really is in you. And
yeah,
when you get out in nature, you feel that primal instinct as well. And, you know, I grew up, my father's retired military, and we moved around when I was very small, but we ended up settling in Panama City, Florida, because we were stationed at Tyndall Air Force Base. And we lived on East Bay, overlooking the Tyndall Air Force Base. So you could see the planes coming in, but I was right there in the water. So I grew up snorkeling and fishing my whole life in that water from when I was 6, 7 years old on. Hunting came later. Hunting came in my 30s through my brother, because my father never hunted. It just wasn't a thing in our household. It was always fishing. And my brother's a very outdoorsy person as well, and taught me a lot growing up. He started getting into it, and he's like, man, I think you'd really enjoy this. Why don't you come with me one time? And I was hooked. I loved it. And the thing I loved more than anything, I don't trophy hunt. It's not my thing. If I get a trophy, that's great. I'm a food in the freezer kind of person is my mentality.
Nice.
But sitting in the morning and watching the sunrise and hearing the world come alive, it's magical. And it's getting away from the noise of what I do on an everyday basis. You know, I spend my life in a venue with noise from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed.
Right.
So to get away from that and to take a breath of fresh air that doesn't smell like a locker room is pretty nice. It's really nice. And that's probably one of my favorite things about it. And then the camaraderie of, you get done with the day, and whether you're successful or not in the hunt, you're all around a campfire telling stories and being idiots. But it brings that back, and it puts these things away, those don't exist out there. And I love it. So it was in me early. I love to fish, and I've grown to love hunting. And I've always loved the outdoors, whether it's camping with my family or camping myself or just being there. It's a thing. It really is. And it's magical to see. I've been lucky enough with the touring to not, I haven't hunted across the country or in the world, but I've seen state parks, and I've been able to go out in nature and hike through, Custard State Park and things of that nature. And it's like, whoa, this is completely foreign to me. I grew up in Florida. This is beautiful as well. And it's neat to see it. And a lot of people don't take the time to appreciate that. They're used to the hustle and bustle of the big city life, and they don't realize how many beautiful places there are in the world, and especially in this country.
Yeah, not too far from their homes either. They just get out there and experience. So can you share one of those stories that you do around the campfire with our listeners? One of your favorite hunting experiences? That's something you'd share with those guys after the hunt. And yeah, I just bring it personal.
Sure. It's a story from a couple of years ago. I got to go out, and where I hunt, we have a lease in Marianna, Florida area. So this is it's right on the border of Alabama. So Panhandle of Florida, border of Alabama.
Nice.
So you have deer. It's a swampland, so you have your gators and snakes and things that want to kill you, bobcats. And we know there's wild boar there. There's hogs there, but we never see them. You just hear them because they're way out in the swamps. So we had set up earlier in the year, and I had a gravity feeder, and I had a tree stand down at the edge of the swamp line. And it was probably a 30-40 minute hike in from camp, maybe 30 minutes hike in from camp to get to my little spot. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go. We got in. I'm going. It's it's still warm out, so I've got basic camo on, and then I put on a net ghillie suit kind of thing, because I figured, okay, this will keep me hidden as much as possible as I'm getting in, and it's still lightweight, And I'm crawling in, and I get to where I'm a few football fields from where I'm supposed to be, so I'm taking the few steps and pausing, a few steps and pausing, and I'm coming down to the middle of the road we had cut, and I hear I look down there at where the kind of the gravity feeder was, and I'm trying to not ramble and make a long story short. I see, I'm like, what is that? Is that bears? There's bears up here, but not in this area. This area doesn't have bears for some reason. No, those are hogs. And they're just covering down there. There's a whole sounder of hogs. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. Nice. I'm going to get down there, and I guess we're going to have a hog for dinner. Great. And then I hear, and I went, and to my right there in the wood line is a giant old male boar staring at me.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to die. It's bow season. If I hit this thing with the bow, it's going to laugh at me because it's so close. It's just going to ricochet off the damn thing. I happen to have my pistol on me, but it's a small caliber 380. I'm like, it's just going to make him mad. What do I do? And it doesn't know what I am because I'm in a ghillie suit. So it's just going, what the hell are you? And then, so I slowly kind of stand up and I back away, and I'm trying to get behind a tree because I'm like, at least I can maybe climb a tree before this thing kills me. And it charges me. And I'm like, that's it. And I scream like a little girl. And and it veers towards me, and then it just takes off to the group.
Oh, wow.
I almost wet myself, and luckily didn't get killed. And it was a great day, and I was able to go back later that night for the night hunt, and I got a nice sow for dinner. So it ended up being a winner.
Wow.
Oh,
that's a great story.
You had the iconic boar charging scenario, man. We get a lot
I got so lucky.
California, man. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you made it out of that one. A lot of guys don't,
No,
they get tusks and up in the pelvic area, and they're hurting.
Yeah, he was a big silverback too. I mean, I was kneeling kind of on the ground. I was squatted down watching the sounder. So, and he was taller than me. So he was a large boar.
Oh,
but
man.
luckily I got lucky. Thank goodness.
I think it was your scream that distracted him. Do you have one of those hunting Do you have one of those hunting trips that you want to do, on the bucket list? Like, geez, I want to go to New Zealand and, hike those peaks and get a red stag, or any of those on the bucket list?
All of them.
Yeah.
Again, I'm so new to hunting. I've been hunting for a little over 10 years that it's all fascinating to me. And, you watch these guys like Steve Rennell, and they're going on all these crazy adventures. I'd really like to get up into y'all's neck of the woods, up in the Montanas, Dakota, Idaho, and get, go hunting an elk. Wow. I've only seen an elk strapped to the front of some guy's car when we stopped at a truck stop. I've never seen one alive in person. How great would that be? Yeah. Or when I did hike through Custard State Park with my father, seeing the antelope up there, how great would that be? I think those adventures, just to hunt the U.S. in a different area, would be great for me. But I wouldn't turn down going somewhere overseas either.
Well, Barry, we've talked about it, man. And when the time works out, we'll get you into the Northwest of Montana, especially. I've got some amazing stuff to show you.
And I want to learn, because I only know, down south style hunting, and it's a very different animal. You guys are taking extremely long shots. You're hiking, and it's a total different way of hunting that I'd love to learn. Whereas in the South, everything wants to kill you in a different way, but it's very tight. The brush is tight. You're not moving around as much.
Much more personal.
So much noise. Well, you end up doing you can do walk and stalk, and some people do and are really good at it, but you don't do as much because palmetto bushes and everything is making noise. So you end up doing a lot more tree stand and sitting, or ground blind and sitting hunting. So it'd be neat to do one of those long hikes up a mountain and getting a sheep or something. It'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, it's really cool what you're doing down in Florida, because in what we've shared, it's a lot like black-tailed deer hunting in California, where I originally came from. There's smaller subspecies of mule deer, and you were seeing some of the bigger whitetail we have up here, in Montana. But my background was where you're at. It's just the non-humid version of Florida. And it's those smaller deer. And this year, I want to congratulate you, because you harvested a pretty darn good sized buck for the size of the deer you have out there, doing the tree stand thing and having that solitude, and cutting that phone off. That's so critical. But That is the beauty of it of other parts of the country is you can go from long range, wide vistas, and then get in real tight. And it's fun to mix it up. And I know up here our hunting seasons are a little colder than you're used to. But,
That's going to be hard on me.
but early season, brother, and then the spring season for like black bear and stuff. I'm a California guy going from hot like you are in Florida, then down to, well, I won't even tell you how cold it is this week up here because it's cold. But
I won't tell you how warm it is here this week. Let's just say I don't have to put on long sleeves right now.
Nice. Do you have a favorite berry that you hunt with, whether it's bow, gun, calibers? Have you picked a favorite yet?
Yeah, I have a favorite gun. I do bow hunt, but I haven't been successful yet. And I'm a pretty good shot up to about 30 yards, but I'm not confident to take anything over that. Which is still a great shot. I mean, most of your bow shots are under that typically. But I haven't been successful, and I hunt with it's a Bowtech, nothing fancy. But my rifle, I used to hunt with a Rossi 30-30 lever action.
Nice.
I love, it just made me feel like a cowboy. It felt good in my hands. And unfortunately, one of those horrible accidents, it fell out of the tree stand and snapped quite a few years ago. And so I was in the market for a new rifle, and I ended up getting a Tikka T3 calibered in 308. And that is the most accurate, fun machine I've ever had, and it's very pretty. And I use a Vortex optics on it, and that's my go-to. I absolutely love that rifle.
Hey, I got to ask you about that rifle because we've talked about that a little bit, and it is a beautiful rifle after seeing pictures of it. But I got to ask you, is it a drummer thing with the 308? Because our drummer Josh runs a 308 Model 70 Winchester with the same Vortex optic you have.
Maybe, I don't know.
so I was telling him about your rifle. He goes, Barry shoots a 308. Well, he's cool beyond being just a drummer then, I go, the ironic part is he's got your same damn scope, Josh, and I helped Josh sight that thing in bore sight and get him on the long range with it. And it was just ironic when you set that over, and I go, okay, maybe there's a trend here. That'd be, the other drummers in the rock and roll world that hunt with a 308 and run Vortex optics or any combination thereof, man. Small world.
I don't know what happened because everybody else pretty much in my hunt camp, my brother and his best friend, they all are 30-06 or 20-06. A 30-06 is probably the most common in this area of a hunting rifle and one of the most commons across the board. But yeah, that one just spoke to me, and it was because it had that beautiful wood stock. I like classic looking things. I have a few, I have modular guns and things of that nature, but they don't speak to me as much as just a classic looking gun or rifle that says something to me. And Vortex, I actually got turned on to them by a man named Ruben who actually works for Vortex and took me on a tour of their facility up in Wisconsin. And took me around, and I got to see what they do, and he turned me on. I never forget, he gave me one of their mil spec scopes, and I looked through it the wrong way because I'd never seen a scope built that way. It's got the really short end. I was like, and he's just laughing at me. I'm like, okay, I don't know that much about this style of scope. I'm used to the plastic. But that's what turned me on to Vortex, was going through there and seeing what they do and hearing their history. They started as the owner was retired military, started as a binocular bird watching company, and then they branched into rifle scopes and things that later on. So it was kind of neat to hear their history, and that's how I got into the Vortex brand.
Yeah, they're a great company, and they make great optics. We're using them a lot out here, and the 308, what a great caliber. I mean, that's something you could do almost anything in the entire country. And we have a lot of 308 shooters up here with the right bullet. It'll do elk. It's good for bear. It's good for smaller stuff. Great for whitetail, and it doesn't kick the heck out of you. Like if you're ever going to put your kid on it, or your wife's going to shoot, or any of those. It's that sniper military caliber we carried on duty for carbines as well as our sniper rifles, and 308's just iconic, and a lot of options there. It's super cool to see that working for you.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy it, and for me, I'm not a large individual. I'm a pretty tiny guy, so anything that really kicks the hell out of me, I'm not a fan of. Yeah.
Yeah,
I need to stay my shoulders. I got to play some drums.
So Bear, staying a little bit on that topic, but you shared with us your second passion to drumming, close second, and it has to do with something we all enjoy. You want to talk a little bit about that on
Sure.
the cooking element?
Man, that is definitely my second passion. I love to cook. That happened out of necessity. You know, I grew up in the Leave It to Beaver family. I always say I had a really good family.
Nice.
You know, my mother was there for me. It was the stay-at-home mom. Dad was military. He was always there for us. So I'm very blessed and lucky, and I know that, and I'm very appreciative of it. But we always had home cooked meals. There was always a meal on the table. You better be home for dinner, and you're going to sit at the dinner table. That is what it was. And, you know, lo and behold, I'm out of the nest at 17 going to college, and I'm eating this horrible cafeteria food. And I'm like, I can't do this. I just can't do it. And at that time, you know, it was early 90s. Emerald was the big thing on the Food Networks. You know, that was just starting. And I started following him because I love Creole and Cajun food, and that was his specialty. And I just started cooking because it was cheaper than eating out, and it tasted better. And I fell in love with it, and I've been doing it ever since. So, you know, from 17 to being in my mid 40s now, I've been cooking, and I cook all the time. And it's funny because my wife can't cook, so I cook for the house. And you know, when I leave, if I go for the weekend to go on a hunting trip or whatever, my daughter says, who's 10, she goes, "We're gonna starve," because, you know, mom doesn't cook.
You're making mom feed us. No.
Yeah. So when I leave for the road, I will do a cook day or a couple days, and I will cook massive amounts of meals, prepackage them, freeze them, or I have a freeze dryer so I can freeze dry. I'm one of those preppers. I like to have food, survival food. So I will prep everything for them. So all the wife has to do is go to the freezer, grab the meal, they're good to go, you know, or maybe they decide that. But I love it. I explore all different kinds of food. You know, my first love being Creole Southern style food, but I've gotten and branched out into Thai food and even Japanese food, which is just foreign to me. So I want to learn those techniques, and I've got shelves of cookbooks and stuff like that. And I've been studying a lot of Jacques Pepin and his methods, very French culinary techniques. So, and I even thought about, and I was going to this time off, going to culinary school just to fill in some of those gaps of my knowledge for the fun of it. But obviously with COVID, it didn't happen. And maybe I will at some point, because I just truly enjoy it. I find it fascinating, and it's something we all have to do. You have to eat, so why not eat good food?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's making us hungry, man. We want to try some very Kirch cuisine.
I will happily cook for you when we get together. I will happily cook. And sometimes, you know, depending on the show day, if you guys come out to a show, my guitar player Zach, he's a Memphis guy, loves barbecue, loves to grill. We actually have a grill on the road with us, and if we're going into a day off, a lot of times he and I will prep during the day, throw some stuff on, and after show we'll have some pork butts or ribs done, and we divvy them up and put them in all the buses, all the opening bands, crew buses, everybody else. We just give everybody a rack of ribs to say thanks, and we get to cook. So it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's super cool, man. That's a treat. Yeah. And that was going to be my other question on that is, do you end up being that guy that cooks for the band when you guys are either maybe recording, traveling, touring, and that kind of thing? Because I would think they just love that. What a treat to have somebody like you in the band that loves to cook and make such good food, especially when you're doing road food, right? And just not centered and having the meals you like to have on a steady basis.
I have, especially during the recording process. I'll if we take a day off, which is very rare. We're all workaholics, so when we get into studio mode, we're there every day, all day, 15 hours. But when we do take those days, I love to cook for the guys and have done that, and they enjoy it. You know, I'll say, hey, what's your favorite meal and things of that nature, and make something really cool and special for them. On the road, not as much. One, you don't have the setup. You know, the bus doesn't really have a kitchen. You know, it's kind of, you can get a hot plate and make stuff, and you can make it happen, but there's not really a dedicated kitchen on a tour bus. We're lucky enough now where we've gotten to the level when we're on a major US, you know, when we're headlining a tour here in the US, we can have catering with us. So we carry our own catering. Nice. And the morale change for that is epic, not only for the band, but for our crew. They know that they're going to get a good hot meal in the morning. They're going to have a great lunch. There's something available.
And then difference. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. Then, okay, we just showed up at the state fair and they forgot we were going to be here. There's no breakfast for our crew and they got to get started. It's horrible. It's just demoralizing. The rest of the day is just a crapshoot. Or the food's just not that good, which it happens. Their catering's not that good, or, oh, we thought you guys wanted hot dogs again. We don't. We'd like a nice meal. Doesn't have to be, a 4-star Michelin meal, but we'd like a nice meal to feed our guys. And what's nice about carrying your own catering is you can also help create the menus, or at least give them guidelines. Hey, this is what we like. This is what we don't like. We have a few vegetarians on the crew or some gluten-free people. Here's what we need. We want a soup every day that's sitting out there so people can quickly snack. We want a good salad bar. For the bands, we can kind of control, because we eat pretty healthy on the road and we work out a lot. So we're like, okay, we want a lot of greens. We want good lean meats, right? That kind of thing. So, and I can help design the menu. And you can also go to them and go, hey man, we're really feeling like we want meatloaf today. We just want a home down meatloaf. And it can happen, those things are good. It's not to say we don't have our cheat days. We do. There's been times, every time we go to Knoxville, Tennessee, where Brent, our singer's from, he grew up going to this Crystals, which is like a White Castle, those really nasty small slider burgers that are so delicious. And this particular crystal he loves. And when we're there, don't think after show we're not on the bus with sacks full of these Crystal burgers, just gorging ourselves.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Oh God, we just eat so many of those things. Next morning, everybody's running off the bus to find the closest bathroom. It's a horrible.
Oh man. No, that's great. It's great you guys have that opportunity to keep that cuisine kind of decent, because it gets to not only morale, right, but it gets to, when you're touring and you're rocking every day and you're traveling, that is physically and mentally taxing to no level. And I don't think people outside of music really understand. They see the glamour of rock and roll, but they don't realize when you're doing a 2, 3, 4-hour show or mixing it up night after night, and especially you as the drummer putting out the most exertion, it's a workout. It's a cardio. It's a anaerobic workout, and you're wrecked. We're wrecked after every 3-4 hour show when we gig, and we're starving and sweating and, having to rehydrate. And you guys are doing it on such a constant basis on the the highly professional level. That food content is so critical for that. And that's another element people don't realize. When you're eating junk and trying to stay healthy as a rock band and be successful, it leads to your success by having that good diet, right?
Absolutely. 100%. You don't realize, and even I didn't realize early on how much it takes out of you, because when you're headlining a show, we've got lighting, pyro going off, fire on stage, and you're trying to give it all and entertain a stadium full of people. It's a lot of work, and if you don't eat good, you feel it. You really do. And the older you get, especially, you do. And we're in a rock and roll band. You want to stay as young as possible, as long as possible. That's kind of the double-edged sword. You want to appear young even as you get older, and that requires you to take really good care of yourself. There's a woman out of Canada who came out to a few shows, and she was doing research on drummers and how much they exert during a show. And she came out a couple times and measured my exertion during a show, and she put on like a heart rate monitor and these bands on my arms to get all the vitals and stuff.
Tilt.
Play the show, and it was so cool because she could register how much you exerted per each song, and which songs were the most aggressive during the set, which were the least. Those kinds of things.
Yeah. And
you could see it all, but at the course of the whole thing, I found out that I burned about 1,000 to 1,100 calories per show.
Wow.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
So you better eat good, better hydrate, because I'm doing that 5 nights a week. The good news about that is I can eat whatever the hell I want when I'm on tour and drink beer and be okay and never get huge. So that's the bonus.
Yeah, no, that's it. The same feeling when I'm training for a hunt or do an athletic event or a triathlon. I can eat like a pig. I can eat pleasure food. I can balance it out. You're right. But then you go back to everyday life, and at our age, man, with the metabolism slowing down, good luck keeping the weight off. So it's no joke. But yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, I've got a COVID 5 pounds that I've had to work off. You know, it happens. But I still work out really hard when I'm home because it feels better, and I don't want to lose that. You know, you always, that first week of getting back to rehearsals and then playing those first few shows, it's just, you can't replicate that until you do it, and it hurts for that first week. You're just sore everywhere. Yeah,
rebuilding all that muscle memory and just that tax on your body and that schedule, and you have to do it really to get back to it. There's no other way to train for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then also for my other guys who, I'm not a singer, but for them, they have to get that lung capacity back up because all three of them are singing. And Brent's not a lot of those rock singers, you'd be surprised at how quiet they sing. Yeah. Brent is polar opposite. His voice is loud. His lungs are massive. I mean, even when he talks, we make fun of him because if he starts talking, if I'm on the phone, on the bus, in the front lounge, and he comes out and starts talking, honey, I got to let you go. I can't hear you. It's just, he takes over the room. He takes over the whole room and doesn't even realize that that's his normal speaking voice.
Yeah. Anyway, that's great. That's what makes them so epic, man. Have to rein back on vocals,
Yeah, there's no reining that kid back. There never has been.
So that's the cooking standpoint of what you're doing, in the house, on tour, doing grills and stuff. But the outdoor element, cooking over a fire, and we talked a little bit about that. Whether it's a hunt, nomadic survival camp, and I've seen some of the stuff you're doing that I want to dive in with you and explore as we've discussed. Talk about your outdoor cooking, because that's such a neat element of cooking over an open fire, cooking things you've harvested, or even bringing things in to mix it up and get that great taste with the cuisine that you can't always get. You have to improvise because of all the materials you don't have, the resources like you would, at home. And what's your forte there, and what do you like to do there?
And I love the story, Barry, when you told that Razorback story. You ended it with, I shot a tasty sow that night. And that just grabbed me, because that's what the kind of guy you are, that the trophy was there. And you were more scared, and then I shot a tasty sow. And that's, I just resonated with me, because that sounded, I'm like, boy, that sounded really good.
Well, what am I going to do with a big ugly hog?
That's
I don't want to eat a big ugly one.
That's what I would do, man. Eater sows are the best.
Yeah.
Yes. When it comes to cooking in the great outdoors, I think keeping it simple is the best part of it. If you pack in some veggies and you just throw those directly over the fire, and wood's important. Around here we have a lot of slash pine, and we'll use like lighter wood to start the fire, but you got to wait for that to burn off, otherwise your food's going to taste horrible. It's going to taste like turpentine. So using good oak or hickory or even maple when available is a lot of the flavor in your food. Nice. I always carry around also some pre-made mixes, like I'll have in my pack some salt and pepper, but also like a couple seasonals that I've made or store-bought if I have a store-bought one. And it's amazing what a little salt and pepper will do to bring that dish alive. It's not hard. And I think the biggest thing is temperature control over those fires.
Yes.
And not burning your meat, or at least making sure you get it cooked relatively through. Yeah, you can eat venison pretty rare, but if you're gonna, and I've eaten bear, but I've never hunted bear. But something like that, you want to cook a little bit more because they have so many. Nobody wants trichinosis. Right. So knowing those little things and keeping cleanliness is important. One of the things we like to do at our hunt camp is we'll buy a bushel of oysters, because there's a place right up the street that's got fresh oysters. And we'll throw those on the fire. You throw those on a rack, you shuck them, throw them on a rack, and eat
that's
those.
A Florida hunting camp for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That doesn't happen everywhere.
Great,
man. No. Maybe Rocky Mountain oysters where John is.
It makes you feel a lot better when you don't have a successful day. At least you got oysters.
Yeah, brother. We don't have the surf and turf option up here in Montana, man. When it's big game time, and I don't think Wayne might. He's a little closer to the coast.
Yeah, we're close, so we could do it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I believe you guys are more the meat and potatoes vibe up there. I don't think I'd want oysters in Montana.
Right.
The right kind.
Yeah, yeah, you can get a good trout out of the stream, and
There you
your
go.
surf and
There
turf.
you go. Get your good fish. So.
You know, and that's one of the things you said, Barry, about what you can do with just a couple of spices, salt and pepper, maybe a little seasoning, and something up here we do, and I'd love to share that, is these glacier high lake trout that are so delicious and don't need a whole lot of breading and a whole lot of, you know, extra stuff added to them, and just cooking them on an open fire right by the lake. That's how we do it up here. You know, we'll cook them for lunch if we're having a good successful fishing day. Then we'll take a limit home, and then we'll catch and release to keep that population going really well.
Sure.
And, you know, and it's funny, growing up as a game warden and being a big game hunter primarily, I wasn't really into fish, which is odd. You know, all my colleagues and Wayne, and coming from a coastal state, and I was on a coastal state in California, we had some of the best seafood, but I wasn't that guy that was really into that. But I started, you know, going for the high lake trout and getting into the pike and things like that. And when they're prepared right, critical, you know, word, prepared right, they're amazing, and they don't take much seasoning, but it's getting that temperature control, like you said, over the fire. You know, letting that fire burn down just enough when you're doing that pan sear, and just sealing that flavor. And man, it's some of the most delicious food ever, outside of it being fish, you know, meat or whatever. Really, really cool. And I think and you guys can both resonate. Wayne and I talk about this all the time, having lived out of our trucks for 30 plus years.
Right.
Everything tastes so much better, and drinks, even water from a stream, tastes so much better when you're out there breathing fresh air and feeling so small and so alive and so grateful to have these resources, and knowing how fleeting that can be to survive out there. It just feels, the level of passion and the level of feeling alive, for lack of a better word, is just incredible. And it's amazing how good that stuff tastes when you're preparing it yourself, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's a complete different flavor, especially when you harvest it yourself and you go through the work and you're thankful for getting it, and you realize, man, my ancestors had to do this every day. That's work.
This is a career, man.
Yeah, food was not guaranteed, people. It didn't always come in plastic. There's not a better feeling, especially sitting there in the wide open. You got your little fire, or you know, even a big fire, but you got your fire going, and you go, that just came out of that stream over there, or the ocean over there, and now I'm able to feed my family with it. And there's nothing better. And especially with fish, I agree with you that simpler is better. And not that I don't love a good fried fish or something like that. I do
too, for sure.
But when you get a really fresh, well-cooked fish, and I like slow and low over a fire sometimes, man, there's nothing better. There really isn't.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And, you know, what about Dutch oven cooking? Have you ever done any of that or been exposed to it? We did that in the Grand Canyon for the first time with our guides, and doing Dutch oven every night on that epic, you know, river and canyon. It was magical how good that tasted. It was my first exposure about 15 years ago. And, you know, we do it periodically. It's involved, but have you had any exposure there? And what do you like about that if you have?
Yeah, actually, I've done quite a bit of Dutch oven cooking. You're talking about taking the cast iron, doing it over the coals, the coals on top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And here's a little tip for you hunters out there. The deer neck is really good in a Dutch oven. So if you get the neck, there's so much meat on there, but obviously it's kind of hard to I actually made deer neck jerky this year off of the one that I was able to harvest, because you get that first flap off is really good for turkey. But get that thing in there with some root vegetables and maybe some beef stock and whatever else, and you get that over the coals, put your coals on top, close it, and leave it for the day. When you're done with your hunt for that day and you come back to that, it's one of the best meals you can have. You got a venison stew waiting on you. Yeah. I've done that. I've done chili out there with it. Chili's always a great staple for camping because it fills you up, and I like to take potatoes, tinfoil them, throw them in the fire, and then when you get your chili done, you got some great baked potatoes. You put the chili over the baked potato. You're super full. You're fat and happy, and you've got some food energy for the rest of the day or night or whatever. So I do a lot of Dutch oven cooking. I like classic campfire cooking and that type of thing. You know, chuck wagon cooking. Got chuck wagon books. I've got a setup in my backyard. My wife makes fun of me. You're so happy every time you're cooking outside. I'm like, I know, I love it. But I got a fire pit set outside that some days I'll just go out there and make a fire and cook outside. I've got a great kitchen at home, but I'd rather be outside cooking over an open fire.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, that's that's starting to become more and more of a thing nationally. And when we, as we get further into the interview, I won't jump too far ahead, but survival cooking outdoors has just become a thing. Given what we're facing and the need to be self-sustaining with family and going from there. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, no, and I think you were to jump into that because you talked about when you open up your freezer that you have stuff in there for prepping and that you're kind of a prepper. And John and I, one of our first interviews was with a friend of mine who is a prepper, and it just opened a lot of doors. And one thing he said to me that really hit me, he's like, how many canning jars do you have on hand? And I'm like, I don't know, a dozen. He's like, well, I know you got 2 big freezers just like I do, Wayne. What are you going to do when your freezers don't have any more electricity?
Power goes out.
And I'm like, he's like, I'm going to can it. He goes, I got 5 dozen boxes down here and I'm going to be able to can all my meat with my canning jars. And he's like, and don't look on the internet for that. You better have a good book that tells you how to can meat. And I'm like, whoa, you want to talk about a shot across the bow? I was like, I thought I was pretty prepared. And I got floored. And then you mentioned having some prep stuff in your freezer and that you were kind of a prepper. And I'd really like to go there and kind of get your feed from that and learn and learn. That's the nice thing about podcasts. We can learn from each other.
I love it. Yeah. He's right. And I'd like to say I'm as prepared as he is, but I'm not. I do have a lot of jars. I do can certain things. I haven't got into canning meats. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm still nervous to do it.
I never liked it. I tried it and I'm not a fan. I can see preserving it for prepping if we don't have power, but I'm not going to eat that on a normal basis. It just comes out, it falls out. It's not my favorite way to use meat.
I'm gonna cut that up. I'm gonna put it in a pan and cover it with whatever I can because it's it definitely tastes like canned meat. But I do pickle a lot of things. I pickle vegetables when I get them from my garden and things of that nature. I love to pickle, and I just like pickles in general. But I do have my freezer. I have a backup generator. So, I live in Florida. Hurricanes happen every other year. So you need a generator, and power has gone out here a few times, and I don't want to lose that freezer full of meat. We make fun of, at least the guys that I hunt with make fun of how expensive the meat is from getting, the time and everything. The per pound of venison is expensive from the time you put in. I don't want to lose that.
No. And
it's happened to myself and to one of my hunting partners. He lost a freezer and happened to not be home. We had a hurricane and the power was out longer than I could sustain it. So that was unfortunate. I ended up just cooking a lot of it. But at the same time, I gifted myself one of those Harvest Right freeze dryers.
Nice.
And that is very helpful and does a great job. And now I've got 20-year shelf life stable food that I made that I know what's in it. And all I have to do is add some water at a hunt camp and I'm good to go. And I try to keep a lot of that on hand. And then I keep a few bug out bags. And, I'm not one of those guys that worries that the world is going to end and our whole infrastructure is going to be gone.
Right.
And I'm going
to
have to
we
take
fall
my
in
family.
That category too. And definitely.
I don't think that's going to happen. But if something like that does happen, I want to at least be able to survive for a few weeks till I figure out what the hell we're going to do.
Right.
And have a plan in that situation. I'm not going to be on my roof trying to snipe people or anything like that, or take over my neighbor's house. But if I'm out of power, we're going to eat just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, but at that point, Barry, it's the basic realistic needs when it's going to come up. You in Florida with hurricanes, us with these big snowstorms, and I mean, just a week and a half ago, we had power go out for 3.5 days up here in Northwest Montana.
Right.
And that's the longest it's ever been out since I've lived here. And our backup generator to run the whole house was literally running for almost 3 days. And we'd shut it down at night. The freezer would sustain all night, guys. And then I'd have to kick it on in the morning just to heat the house and make sure our perishables, Wayne, like you were saying, and Barry, didn't go. Because we've got, since COVID, there was an extra freezer purchased. Obviously, it's full of game meat and other stuff, but that was an eye opener. And it's not so much about the apocalyptic end, but what if we're shut down for 3, 4, 5 days and we got to feed the family, or the power does go out beyond that? those are realistic things I think we need to prep for. And
And
through
empty
COVID,
shelves during COVID kind of kicked that off too. To are you
did.
prepared?
Yeah.
Not. I guess preppers have a bad name, but it's being prepared for situations like that. And to be honest with you, we didn't have 3 cases of toilet paper, so
No, we didn't either.
right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
I was a little nervous when that was out for a while. Like, I hope we're not going to run out by the time we get there. So,
That wasn't a good idea.
No.
I was like, man, we're going to be in a bad place.
Yeah.
But one of the things we need to think about moving forward, if we haven't learned anything from COVID, that was kind of a shot across the bow, because it certainly could have been a lot worse, but it was alarming enough. And I know we've talked about this a little bit before in other shows, and Wayne and I, like he mentioned, have as well. Through the heat of when COVID dropped, those were our first big episodes when this podcast started. But man, what an eye opener. And that's, one of the things I really got to like when you and I got to first start talking about you is you're like us, you're a gadget guy.
Yeah.
You like cool tools, whether it's firearms, flashlights, cooking implements, but it goes beyond just liking good gadgets. These are gadgets that are going to get us through to the next day, rain or shine, power or not, sleet, snow, hurricane, whatever. And I think a lot more people in America kind of got onto into that mindset, when
I think it's
dropped.
Yeah, I think it scared them when they realized, here I am, and I'm not making fun of city person, but I'm a city person and I have none of these skills and my city is shut down.
Right.
What do I do? What do I do? And I think it really forced them to take a look internally and go, I don't know how to cook because I'm used to going to the bodega at the end of the street every day. I don't know. I have nothing in my house. I've got a lot of friends that work with us, my management company and my label, they're all based out in New York City. They're still shut down.
Right.
And not all of them, they're like, now what? I've got a 1-bedroom studio apartment and I can't go anywhere. That's a weird feeling,
Yeah,
and I think it turned a lot of people around. And that's a good thing. Now that the panic of it has passed, I think initially it was a bad thing because people were hoarding toilet paper and just weird things because everybody went in full panic and weren't really being rational about what they needed. And neither were the stores. The stores, they ended up having to start limit things, and it was so irrational. The things they were worried about, but then again, none of us alive have been through this, so now we know.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I think as bad as it's been, and we talk about this a lot on the show, is always play to the positives in any bad experience. And what do we learn out of this? And you said it best, brother, at the beginning was, we stopped going on the road. We stopped doing conventions and trade shows and book signings. And just like you on the band, I mean, I was, for 18 months, I was in Montana, maybe a month total for the first year and a half of relocating here after retiring from California. And don't get me wrong, I love that aspect. I think we're very blessed to do what we do and be on an outreach, whether it's musically, mentoring, instructing, teaching, training, making the world a better place. But COVID shut that down and everything went to Zoom remoteness. And I was home for a whole summer. I was home for a whole spring. I got to spend time with aunts and uncles and family and friends, bandmates, that I never did before. And in the process of that, got to spend more time in the outdoors. And I know I've shared this, finally got to get into wilderness area and explore lakes I've never been into. And I think that was so recentering, it just brought back what really matters. And it kind of changed the perception of what we do professionally. Not to, obviously we're all workaholics to be effective, and we take it very seriously, and we're very blessed and don't take that for granted. But to put it in perspective, I mean, with your wife and daughter and being close and knowing there was a shortage of things. And
sounds like a song.
I think there was a positive experience for us all, right, Wayne?
Yeah.
To come out of this thing and regroup with what's important and be better prepared, for the future. Yeah. So we're not caught quite as uncomfortable next time around. Heaven forbid it happens again, or even worse.
Sure. And it was nice to slow down, honestly.
Yeah.
I think all of us, you guys, I would imagine our programs, we're all programmed very similar, as we're go-getters and we got to go, and I got to get it done. And I think in order to be effective in the careers you guys chose, you have to be that type of personality, not necessarily type A, because I'm not a type A person, but I'm a very aggressive worker. I think that's important. And when you finally take a seat back and you go, this is nice to slow down. And I don't sit down. I never, right now I'm sitting down, but typically throughout the day, I don't sit down. My wife gets mad at me because I never sit down. I don't sit on the couch and watch TV. It's just not in my makeup. But I always stand in this one particular area in the kitchen that overlooks the TV. They call it my office because I'm in there and yeah, the TV's on, but I'm actually doing something else. And I can't sit down. You know, why don't you join us on the couch and watch a movie? I'm like, nah, I got other things I want to do.
Yeah, Barry, in tactics, we call that the Overwatch position and situational awareness. You're kind of
right. Of course, you guys have a name for that. You have a name for everything.
And probably an acronym to go with.
You got to make it sound fancy.
You got to make it sound cool, right?
Yeah. What's your acronym for when you have to go poop in the woods? Do you have a name for that too?
Yeah, we call that a combat squat.
There you go. See, I knew you would.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys, and this is totally off topic, but it's not off topic. It's on topic, but not exactly what we were just talking about. What would you recommend, and how would you like? Say, I want to go hunting on public lands, you know, and here's this dreadlocked, bearded weirdos coming to my state park.
Right.
How would you want to be approached as a game warden? Because I'm going to go check in, I'm going to follow all the rules and that type of thing, and say, hey, it's turkey season, I want to go do some spring turkey hunting. How would you want to be approached as a warden by a stranger who is probably armed or getting ready to be armed to go into the hunting area? What are those scenarios like for you guys, and how do you, at the time, obviously you're retired now, but how did you want to be approached by the civilian in those situations? What's a good way to do that? And you know, I think it'd be interesting from a warden perspective. Hey, this is what we're looking for the civilian out there that's going to do that type of thing.
Man, Barry, that's a really good question. No one's ever asked that. So one, I'm going to say thanks for Wayne and I both for asking that, because the real solution to that is just going in honest, enthusiastic, not intimidated. Like if people come up to us or they give that, you know, we call it that furtive movement, they're getting jiggy, maybe there's something to hide. We're kind of concerned, well, you know, is this man or woman, are they okay? You know, could they possibly be a criminal with a history? Do they have a warrant? Are they really legitimate sportsmen or sportswomen, conservationists, or are they just out hiding out in the woods? And we get a lot of bad people hiding out in the woods to get off the LE radar. But if if you're not armed and you come up to us and, you know, you say, looking, you know, the rock star, hippie, whatever look.
There's a lot of people that look like you, Barry, that we deal with. So
yeah, I bet. Yeah. There's a lot of hippie outdoorsmen.
There's a lot of outdoorsmen look just like you. Yeah. And we love them.
And in our world, brother, it's all good, but it's really that approach, you know, it's just coming in unassuming, you know, not defensive, not giving off a bad vibe, you know, furtive movements. We can sense that.
Exactly.
We get, when people are anxious or when people are intimidated by law enforcement, you know, it's that vibe with the same thing on tour. You can just sense it in people, and we sense it all the time. And that's that spider sense, sixth sense that we rely on to survive a bad encounter. And they've saved our lives for both Wayne and I and our colleagues many times. But just coming up friendly, approachable, you know, not defensive, not showing any type of threat where, you know, if you had a gun and it's not in your hand when you're seeing the warden, leave it in the truck. You know, maybe unload it, and then, hey, how you doing, sir or ma'am? I'm so-and-so, you know, I'm Barry Kirch from so-and-so, and I'm just coming into this public land area. I'm doing turkeys for the first time. You know, I've only been hunting for about 10 years. Do you guys have any tips? When you approach us like that, we're like, oh man, this is an ally. This is a part of the thin green line. I'm going to pull out all the stops, and so are Wayne. We're going to help you get a turkey. We're going to tell you the hot spots to go. And if you got your little girl with you, the coolest experiences ever, man, as a patrol game warden was seeing, you know, father and daughter, father and son, any mother, son, whatever combination out there, paying it forward to the next generation. And they're out there on that first hunt, and maybe they haven't harvested an animal, and you can get them on track to do so, or you can have that great educational conversation, and or when they do get that animal. And I remember a particular case that resonates as probably a top 5 experience. And it was actually Wayne and Barry when we were filming our Wild Justice Game Warden reality show for Nat Geo, the second season. And I'm on an ATV in one of my wildlife areas in California. And our A-zone deer season, Barry, it's 90 to 100 degrees. It's small black-tailed deer, not a lot different than what you're doing, except guys are kind of spotting and stalking in oak woodlands, you know, and running big mountains. And this young kid, you know, he was 13, 14 years old with his father, got his first A-zone blacktail. It was a little forked horn. It wasn't a monster buck, but, you know, it was the trophy of a lifetime, like my first buck. And I took a tiny little crab claw, man, at 14 and a half. And that was the best experience ever hunting, right? To get into it. Like Wayne has same experiences. But I remember they were like 5 miles into the backcountry. They were out of water. This deer is going to spoil. They got to drag this thing partially boned out, and they're getting their butts kicked to get back. And no vehicles allowed in this area. They park in a parking area, and it's all walk-in only. And I did what typically we don't normally do, because I had a whole opening season of hunters to check. I had an ATV in a rack. I had my patrol lab with me. So we adjusted. I took their deer on the ATV, took the deer back to the vehicle, had some water, gave it to them, brought them back some water, and saw them all the way out to the vehicle, back to the staging area, so that meat didn't spoil. Because it would have broke it. It was just heartbreaking to see this kid with his first deer, and knowing that 15 minutes later that meat was going to be gone if we didn't get it.
Yeah.
So, but you know, it was that approach. It was just how cool they were and how honest they were, and you know, they weren't doing anything wrong. And something we see in the thin green line of game wardens that makes it very unique for our job is we don't want to push people away and be that intimidating law enforcement factor that puts a bad tone or a bad taste in anybody's mouth. Now, if you're a deliberate poacher, we're going to come down hard on you, you know,
as you should.
And you guys too, you guys out there are part of our thin green line as conservationists, and you're turning in poachers because they're decimating what we all love. But that's a very small percentage of who we deal with as game wardens. And that's what made our job so cool, is they were guys like you. You know, they were allies. They were basically not badged officers, but you guys are an extension of our thin green line. And you're like our little satellites out there protecting wildlife and being informants. So that's what we look for. And when you look at us as allies and you come and seek us out, we're really humbled and really honored by that, because even a majority of ethical legal hunters will say, okay, you know, I haven't seen game wardens that much. I think everything's legal. I did everything I could, but maybe I missed something, and I hope he doesn't talk to me, you know, and we sense that vibe. And then it might not be a good fluid conversation where we're going to be as supportive. So if long-windedly, if that kind of makes sense, but that is a great question, huh, Wayne, that we haven't gotten. That's cool, man. Thanks for asking that.
It is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate the answer, and it does make sense, you know, and it's not that you know, at least for me personally, I'm not nervous to go talk to anybody, and especially not a game warden. I find it fascinating, and I want to know the hot spots of wherever I'm at, whether it's fishing or not. And if anybody's going to know, it's the local game warden that works there.
Right.
But you know, it's nice to know that that's kind of the approach to take, because it's got to be scary for you guys and you gals that are in that business. You've got people with loaded weapons everywhere, and mistakes happen every year, every time. And it's got to be a scary thing to know that that's what you're going into every day. I don't know that I could do what you guys do because of that. You know, you have to put a lot of trust, not only in your training and yourselves, but you have to oddly trust people that have deadly force with them. And that's got to be difficult.
It's funny you say that, because it's that sixth sense we develop. A friend of mine who's a chief of police, he drove with me one day and we checked hunters, and he said the same thing. We got in the cruiser after a while. He's like, I don't know how you do this. He goes, I'm all nerved up around guns all the time, because that's the way I'm trained. I see a gun and I got to address it. You know, there's a problem because I see a gun. Where we see a gun, it's a normal thing. We have to rely, just like John said, on interpreting the body language, the conversation, and using, and I use that sixth sense because it saved me so many times. So when the hair stands up on the back of your neck, I tell people that I train, believe it. Even if you're wrong, you're going to be right. But 9 times out of 10, believe that sixth sense, because you've developed it by learning people. And when there's something wrong, there really is something wrong, and believe it and act on it. So, but yeah, no, I thanks for taking that perspective. So, because a lot of people don't think about that.
Well, you know, I think it's different being out in the woods and a woodsman with you guys than when you get pulled over by a police officer and you were speeding. That's a different feeling. You're like, okay, do I have everything? Where's my paperwork? And you get a little nervous because you're like, do I have everything in order? And you broke the law. You were speeding. You did it. Everybody knows they did it. You can try to get out of it. You were speeding. So that's a different feeling than I imagine being in the woods and then you're walking up on me. That's different, and maybe I'm in my hunting zone and I don't necessarily know that you were coming. So it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me the work you guys do and have done in the past. It's just truly fascinating.
Well, we appreciate it, brother. And one of the things that's so cool about the job, and what you just said is you're deep in the woods, you're in a tree stand, and next thing you know, behind you is maybe a camoed out game warden that's behind you, and they've just been watching you for maybe hours. You have no idea, and that's a very unnerving feeling for the hunter, and it's also a very potentially dangerous situation for us as game wardens. But some of the most heinous violations happen so far in the backcountry, so far behind locked gates, by people really poaching a lot of animals because they're cut off and they don't normally see a game warden, or game wardens don't have that access. But some of the most critical, like wildlife saving cases, were illegal baiting operations that I did out in California. And they might be 30 miles into the backcountry that took a commitment of trucks, ATVs, then a hike, then setting up a camouflage hide, setting up surveillance, and watching literally a spot for a whole deer season, because it was like a conspiracy enterprise going on where not only were way too many animals being taken from a baiting operation, or you were getting the genetics of big bucks from out of the area where they needed to be spread out for genetic diversity. Now they're coming into one concentrated area, and not only are they all getting killed, but the meat's maybe getting sold commercially, and all kinds of heinous stuff. And when we get into commercial wildlife, and stuff that we really haven't dove into with you, but to do cases like that, you got to be pretty sneaky, and you got to get in unconventional ways. And it's unnerving, it's unnerving when we do those contacts and you finally make that takedown or bust, because these are guys that feel very, very insulated because they're so far back in their own little realm, and they know it's so arduous to get to them that they're never going to get caught, and they get very greedy because they think they're never going to get caught. And that's what we call the intentional violator versus the sportsman that just makes a mistake, that we want to give a warning to, and we want to mentor and kind of nurture that relationship. So it can be unnerving on both sides. It's just, and again, so few are that bad as far as the poaching side. That's a very small percentage, but they all have guns, and when you're that far in the backcountry, you can imagine how that can go. For one, the hunter, a hunter seeing a game warden and then being that game warden that might have to have a contact, maybe issue a citation, seize a weapon. If it is a poaching issue, it's that's the challenge of the job, certainly. And it's something we just try to do as safely as possible. And fortunately, Wayne and I made it out safe after some good careers.
Right. And I imagine with those guys, those situations, when you're getting into a poacher of that caliber, they probably have some priors and other things that make it
definitely
even more dangerous to be around them, because they don't care. They just don't. There's no respect there at that point.
Yeah, but a guy like you coming up to approach, you're an ally. You're part of the team, man. And once we have that conversation, I know I speak for Wayne and I both. What made us effective as game wardens, and then eventually when we became team leaders and our game wardens, is developing a level of trust with the community and getting a group of informants that are so passionate about wildlife. And they see that, like you as a drummer, you're respected in the rock and roll industry because you're a great drummer, you're hardworking, you're professional, and you're a team guy. It's the same way in our profession. When the public and these are people you don't just get the respect from instantly. Ranchers that have had cattle ranches and hunting clubs, for 100, 200 years. And I'm going back to, lifelong friends in California, for them to trust you to a level where they will call you for a violation. They'll let you onto their property, give you a key to patrol anytime. You have to be there for them, and they have to know that you're going to take care of a problem when a problem arises, and if you don't follow through with that, and you burn that bridge, you might have cut off a whole area, man, of a deer population, an elk herd that you're never going to get on the inner circle, and animals are going to get poached and destroyed that you're never going to be made aware of, especially when you're working your hometown. And so for like Wayne and I literally spent out of 28 years, 25 of those were in the Silicon Valley where I grew up. So I was actually working my hometown. So there was there was an added element of urgency there to be good to my home peeps, so to speak. Wayne as well. You're in your hometown. So, all that really matters. So developing that reputation and getting friends like you and other guys. And on that note, and a little long-winded, but there's that, what we call the poacher to preacher concept, where I would apprehend a violator that was, he was a regular poacher, not a violent guy necessarily, good-hearted, wasn't doing crazy, heinous other crimes, but he was a chronic poacher. He didn't pay attention to seasons. He hunted big bucks in the rut, in parks, or, whatever. And, you make a case on somebody like that, but you have a conversation that isn't abrasive. You're as respectful as you can be. You're as empathetic as you can be. You don't go overly aggressive, but you say, hey, look, this is horrible what you're doing. I got to take you on this. I got to issue this site. I got to seize this weapon. And I got to be honest, man, you're hurting wildlife for this reason. It's not the way of life you agree with, but this is what I'm about. I've had guys like that come back to me in a year and go, you know what? You were so cool the way you treated me. You could have been a complete ass. Because I know I've been poaching for years. I was not that guy that deserved a warning. I admit that. They've been through court. They've had their conviction. They paid their fine. Maybe they've lost hunting privileges for 3 years. Maybe they've lost them in heinous cases forever. And, but say, I really like how you treated me, man. And can I have your number? I know a lot of stuff and I agree. It's not the way we should be doing things. I don't want to be a poacher anymore. Our thin green line of wildlife resources is so precious. And then I get this informant that end up leading to the best cases that we ever have on the wildlife front, because Wayne and I can't just go out there and patrol and find it. It's a needle in a stack of needles, as low numbers as we are as game wardens for all the stuff going on out there, especially through COVID. So it's those relationships. And that's how I would address you had I not knowing you in the field, and make an ally, and you'd like us, and we'd have that friendship, and you'd probably be really receptive to helping us out if you did see something. And that's what the thin green line's about. We're a force multiplier now,
Yeah, I like it.
Exactly.
That's how it should be. I think if we're all on the same page and enjoy the wild as much as we do, you want to take care of it and treat it with the respect it deserves.
Yeah. And that kind of one of the final toward the end questions I was going to ask you. One of the coolest things about meeting you is seeing a conservationist in what we consider a non-traditional conservation-like lifestyle, right? You think a rock and roll drummer, you think of rock and roll bands. You don't hear too much of the rock and roll music industry being really necessarily overtly passionate about the outdoors and the thin green line and conservationists. And then so meeting you through our mutual friend, John, over at Silver Spear was a real blessing, man, to get to know what you're about and share it. And something we've been able to do since retirement is branch out to untraditional areas in professions that have that same passion. Whether they hunt or fish or not, they love the outdoors, they believe in conservation and our resources that are under siege all the time. It's been neat to see it through you in the rock and roll world. I know there's some country artists that I've gotten to know through other, brand outreach type guys. The off-road racing community has a lot of hardcore conservationists within it, and they have some reach. I'm working with them. But what can you say about your industry and other people to promote it within rock and roll? Because, there's some rockers out there that love the outdoors like you. I know some of the Metallica guys, and, I think of some of the country artists that are also involved. What's been your vibe there, and how can we help expand this message and get more eyes and ears and participation in the thin green line, if you will?
Sure. I think it would be surprising to a lot of people how many in my industry are the outdoorsy type and like to get away. And much like myself, you spend so much time locked into clubs, venues, arenas, whatever.
Yeah.
When you're done with that, you want to get out. So, I know the singer from Stained, Aaron Lewis, he's a big bow hunter, massive bow hunter.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before, but even the non-hunters, there's a lot of guys that my bass player is a big fisherman, and he's a big outdoorsy guy, and he grew up hunting in the Carolinas, but he one day just stopped. He couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't for him. And I respect that. He knew that it wasn't for him, and he just doesn't do it anymore, but he still loves the outdoors. There's a lot of us. And I think we probably could do a better job being more vocal about that.
Right.
But being in the entertainment industry, sometimes you pick and choose your battles because you don't want to alienate a large portion of your audience. So you got to be really careful about that, especially as a younger band. You know, myself being a little more established, I have a little more leeway to go, this is what I'm about, because some people do frown upon it. You know that, I know that. But I think from what we could use more is knowing how we can help.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, we have a voice and we have, I could say, this is what I'm about, but where can we do that? How can we help? What organizations can we align with? It's something I'd love to know, and maybe you guys can enlighten me in ways that, and enlighten the people that are eventually going to be viewing this. Where do we go to help? You know, I'd love to know, even locally, and I've thought of this, you know, locally, how can I help conservation where I'm at right now? Do I go to the local game wardens and go, how can I help you? Or, you know, what is that we can do with our power of who we are as people, and how many people we can talk to, and how we can get out there? What do we do?
Yeah,
Right.
I think one of the coolest things, and Wayne, I think you'd agree with this, is one, being vocal where you can. So having a podcast like this with us with a little bit of reach is great. Something I've noticed with the other podcasts we've done together, the band, Shinedown's been putting that out and sharing it, which is really cool. And I hope certainly we'll tag, and, you know, if you guys want to share this as well. Great conversation for people to hear without alienating anybody. Because one thing we say within the Thin Green Line is conservation isn't about, you don't have to be a hunter and angler to be all about the Thin Green Line of environment. You know, we are a unifying kind of message, whether you're a preservationist, conservationist, you're anti-hunting, you're pro-hunting. The bottom line is we just want our wildlife species to be balanced. We want our outdoors to be safe. We want our water to be clean. And it's kind of an American, you know, institution that we, you know, you said it yourself, when you tour all over the nation and you see the amazing diversity of beautiful wildlands we have, from Glacier National Park where I'm at, and the Cabinet Mountain Wilderness, to the Everglades, and everything you have out in Florida, to all the cool, you know, hardwood timber that Wayne has up in New Hampshire for bear and moose and everything else. This country is amazing. You know, absolutely amazing. And I think just by vocalizing that and sharing stories without pushing anybody in any one direction to be a hunter, let's say, but just to appreciate the outdoors is a good method. And then all those, you know, Wayne, some of the conservation agencies
like the Operation Game Thieves, a lot of those are nonprofits that we work with. And I'm a former president of International Wildlife Crime Stoppers, which kind of encompasses all of North America. Which is a nonprofit foundation that provides grants to agencies that need them, game wardens that need help, because financially sometimes we take it on the chin, and so they have you know, grants that they can actually give out to those people, and for their Operation Game Thief trailers. Because one thing we do is we do a lot of outreach to the public, so we show them the poaching. We also show them the success stories we've had with catching poachers. So, you know, you pull up to a fair or a venue with all these deer heads in there, and everybody draws over and comes sees the deer heads. But each deer head has a story there, because it's in there because it was seized. It was an illegally taken deer, moose, turtle. We have a walrus skull in our Operation Game Thief trailer that we seized in New Hampshire because it had scrimshaw on it that was illegal. It's actually fake scrimshaw, so it was probably taken illegal. It could be legally possessed by a Native American in Alaska, could have sold that if it was scrimshaw and signed, but the way it was done was illegal. So that tells us that whole walrus is illegal. So we saw that on a Facebook post in New Hampshire. And we did a warrant. One of my more aggressive guys was like, hey boss, this is what I found. Can we do a warrant on this? I'm like, and he had all the research already done. This is why it's illegal. This. I'm like, okay, let's do a warrant. We knocked on the guy's door.
Rap case for the lieutenant, Wayne. I love it.
Yeah. So we went and got our walrus skull, and boy, does that add some conversation to something. Because here in New Hampshire, there's a walrus skull with ivory tusks in our Operation Game Thief trailer. And I tell that story, and people tell that story, and now we're educating them to that we're not just the deer out there checking hunting licenses and drinking coffee.
Right.
Well, you are, but there's a lot more to the job.
There is a lot more. We are doing we are.
Gotta keep it balanced, right, Barry? Gotta keep it balanced.
Have your coffee. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So, support us in those other ways too, but that's great. If people want to actually give some financial support, or even, memberships are cheap for international wildlife crime stoppers for individuals. I think they're $30 a year, if that. And just to be that force multiplier, had that decal on your vehicle, and to be our eyes and ears out there to help that way is just, it's John's right. We can't do it by ourselves. The best cases we ever made, we didn't make them on our own. We got a tip, and that's cool. And breaking down that, the society that I started in and did 20 years, you were a rat if you told the game warden. And I used to have this farmer would tell me a story that was all truthful and factful, but he wasn't being a rat. He'd just tell me a story about how this moose got poached. And if I was going to poach a moose, it'd be in a big Cadillac with a big trunk, and it wouldn't be a big moose. It would be a calf moose. and I asked him, well, what color Cadillac would that be? Oh, it was like a grayish Cadillac, but he wasn't a rat, because it was that can't be a rat. Can't be a rat. And I preach, be a rat. Be a rat. Guess what? I'm going to tell the game warden. I'm going to tell him that you're doing stuff wrong. In our recent Warden's Watch with Carlos Gomez, a church guy was out there poaching like crazy. And the guy, the guy sitting next to him in the pew knows this is his best friend. He can't handle it anymore. He has to call Carlos, because he tells this guy, stop poaching. You got to stop poaching. Here's a guy that goes to church every Sunday, is out poaching. And finally his brother church member says, I got to call the game warden. I can't stand this anymore. So please stop him. And that's how we make that case.
You can't do that. I don't understand the serial poaching. I don't get it. How many deer do you need?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
This guy was the Robin Hood. He was killing them and having them pay for the butchering. It was more about the kill, I think. It's an interesting scenario.
No, thank you.
I know. It's hard for normal people to wrap their heads around this, because it's not normal.
It's not normal. That's not normal. The people that just want to go wantonly kill animals, it's one step away from serial killers, and it is in a way serial killers.
And that's, Barry, you're hitting it on the head. That's the small percentage of people we run across, and it's something we can't fathom, because how precious wildlife is. And people that don't hunt and don't fish, or just aren't conservationists, they look at it and go, well, wait a minute, you're hunting and killing animals, but you love wildlife. That's an oxymoronic argument. How can that work? And then you explain the conservation model and how it benefits wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get those serial killers. You really do. And we run across guys that are one step away from, maybe it being even worse than just massively killing animals. And that's, we talked about the sixth sense, and this, reading people well in your business, is when you contact these guys, or gals in some cases, it's just eerie. It is dark. You just feel a sense of darkness, and there's no light in that scenario, and that's where the spider senses are going. You're on your weapon, you're ready. It might be a more aggressive contact or vehicle stop. And we've been there and done that. And I can't fathom it, to this day, how disgusting it is to see that. But there was a small percentage element of people out there doing that, and the impact is just exponential on damaging wildlife. That's why, we use the thin green line term, very specifically. We are a very, very thin green line, and we're grateful to you for being part of it, because of what's being depleted out there. So there's that as well. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we didn't really talk, Wayne, about that serial killer mentality that we've seen. And and for a game warden, that's like the case of a century. When you catch somebody that's massacred 200 bucks, during the rut in the winter range, anywhere, say out here in the West, what that has helped the species recover from, the impacts of something like that one crew can do, it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. So, that's what we're targeting, and that's the small percentage we're out there for.
That's great. Because to cull that many, I can't imagine how quickly that would decimate a population in that area.
Absolutely.
And you think how many hours you spend in your deer stand, enjoying every moment and not seeing a buck, and waiting and not complaining about it, just glad to be out there. And then when you do finally get that harvest, you're like, wow, man, I got one. And if I don't get one, hey, it's not the end of the world. My family's not going to starve. I got some meat in the freezer, and You know, I think I shared with you, we're on the average of getting a buck every 2 or 3 years, or a couple of bucks here in Montana. And it's just the magic of being out there. And then you see these slob killers taking 20, 30 deer at night under a spotlight when they're in the breeding cycle with these magnificent genetic trophies. To put it back, man, it's heartbreaking. And we get very passionate about catching those guys, you know, as you can imagine.
I can imagine. I can imagine, because, you know, you're right. Not every year is a lucky year. One of my partners in my hunting club, he's not having a good year, and he's mad as hell about it, you know, because we keep seeing it in our little area. We keep seeing this beautiful group of 3 does walking, and we're like, there's got to be one behind him.
Where's that buck?
Been there. He hasn't been there this year. There's nothing more frustrating than sitting in your stand watching those 3 doe walk right under you.
Yeah.
You sit there the rest of the day and there's nothing.
Yeah. Come on, man. Where's that tail sniffer? We need a buck. We need some rut.
I know you're here.
I always say,
I know you're here.
I always say, if you get a good buck every year, you're either really good or you're cheating. So, and that's my job to find out. I have a friend that gets a good buck, and he doesn't get one every year, but it's close, and it's a really good buck. And every year he calls me and he wants to tell me very detailed. He goes, I can bring you out there, Wayne, and show you, or I can bring a game warden out there because I know your policy and I want you to know that I'm really good.
Right.
Doing it with fair chase, man.
But he cherishes those years he doesn't get one too. He's like, hey, I didn't get one this year.
Right. I mean, this year was my first good size buck. I've had a couple in the past, but not a good size. This was first in 11, 12 years of getting a good one.
Yeah, that was a great buck, bud. That was you know, from Florida, California standard, man, that was a monster.
He's a big guy. I've got his I ended up
Can you turn the camera so we can see it? I'd love to see it.
I'll grab it. It'd probably be easier.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Please share it. We'd love to see it.
Because Patreon guys would love to see this. Patreon girls.
What's neat about this guy?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I
got
like
some
the height.
mass. Yep.
Nice height.
But what's neat about it is he's got this. Let's see if I can point it out. He's got a hole.
Oh
man.
Character.
He's got this weird hole that was bored through, and then on the back side you can see where he had a tine broken off here, probably last, early in the season or something. I can't tell. It just looks so broken off, weird. So he's got character, and that's what I really like about him. I'm actually gonna end up mounting him to a broken cymbal.
That would be.
I love it.
Hey, that's the drummer's mount, man. Josh might have to copy that with one of his deer. I like
awesome.
that. Wow,
that's awesome. That's personal.
Good eye guards on him, Barry. That's cool.
Yeah, for Florida, that's a good sized deer. They get a little bit bigger because it's where I hunt is the border of Alabama, and Alabama gets some giants. But for Florida, that's a happy day.
Yeah, congrats, bud. That's great.
Yeah, great. Definitely.
So as we kind of wind down, bud, is there anything you want to tell our audience from the standpoint of what you stand for, what you'd like to see out there, what we all do together moving forward on the Thin Green Line?
I think the most important thing and the biggest takeaway is, two things: to keep learning, because I know I am, I'm young in some of this. I'm old in tooth when it comes to being in nature and fishing and things like that, but I'm very young in the hunting area. But also, none of that matters if you don't go out there and just enjoy nature. I think it is being lost on our younger generations and on people in general. They don't realize how special nature is. I'm very lucky that I enjoy it, and I'm teaching my daughter to enjoy it, and she's very much into it. She's not into hunting at all, but she enjoys nature.
Awesome.
And I think if anybody out there listening to this, watching this, the biggest thing is teaching somebody else, whether it's your family member or a friend's family member or a friend of a friend's kid. Take them out in the woods and show them how special it is. Even as a camping trip with your kids can change their life forever. You realize so much more is out there when you do this.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Definitely.
Pay it forward.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. Pay it forward, because people are forgetting about it. They're lost in these wonderful technologies that we have that we all need and use, but that thing outside is getting lost.
Yep. Amen to that. Well, man, wow.
Yeah.
Great covering a lot of good stuff, man.
It's fun. I enjoyed this a lot.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
did
Thanks for
too.
coming on the show. It's been good to finally break this down with you. And we
Thanks for
just
having me.
look forward to seeing you on the road and hope you guys get back on the band track sooner than later. And best to your bandmates and all that good stuff. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And again, if you guys ever need anything in the future, I'm here. So don't hesitate to ask.